I'm Fred Bland. I am an architect in New York. This little garden that you've been looking at with me for the past day is, or was, before COVID, a weekend garden, which meant that I had 2 or 3 days at most a week during the growing season to work on it.
And where are we?
We're in Stony Creek, Connecticut, which is about 95 miles from my home in Brooklyn Heights, New York.
So, Fred, tell me what the property was like before you started gardening here.
Oh my, you can't quite imagine what this property was like. First of all, the little shack that we've started with was a 2-car garage built in 1949. And the garden part, the good part of this was that the little structure was 6 feet off the front road, the lane, which meant the whole back could be gardened. And it meant it was a little more like a European situation where the house fronted the street and leaving, instead of, a big front yard, which is kind of unusual. American front yards, I think, are for show. But in Europe, you don't have front yards so much, you have backyards. So that's what we had, a big backyard and no front yard, but the backyard, so to speak, it's almost 300 feet deep. It was 50 feet wide only. But compared to my 20-foot wide townhouse in New York, it seemed like a mansion and an estate with that almost 300 feet in the back. But it was a complete wreck. There was no real grass. There were trees that had fallen and not been changed. The weeds were taking over. And it was lived in. It had been converted into a little shack, really, where a young guy lived with no heat other than a wood-burning fireplace. That was it. So we took over, and that's what we started with. And then, of course, the garden changed when it enlarged itself. And we got another house when my wonderful next-door neighbor, who was age 97, when each of us discovered that she and I, she wanted me to buy her house and I wanted to buy her house. So we did that, and we got another 100 feet of width. So that enlarged the garden and gave us another house to do.
How big is the actual garden now, currently as it stands?
The garden itself, and all the property, I should say, with the little buildings and the houses on it, is just slightly under 1 acre.
Oh my God, it feels so expansive.
It's meant to feel that way, and I think if it were much bigger, I would not be able to take care of it myself, which I mostly do.
So what was your first gardening project that you tackled? What area did you landscape first?
Oh, right back here. And I actually, unlike a lot of people, being an architect, of course, I drew it. I plotted it out and staked it out and planted those yew hedges, which you see, there are about 45 of them, and I planted each one of them on the hottest summer that I remember of 1993. It was a disaster out there. We had a pile of manure brought in and they dumped it right under the windows here, which didn't have screens. It was pretty rough living that first summer. We almost gave up and abandoned ship. My wife held out. She said, "No, we're staying. We're gonna make this work." But it was that, and it was frankly, I was then and still am mesmerized by creating borders. It's an incredible job. I know it's not today maybe as popular as it once was because it's a lot of work, maybe they're out of fashion. But I find that as an architect maybe, or just as a design problem, it's an infinitely variable problem. And my two borders, my twin borders with my little, it's narrowed from about 10 feet now to about 3.5 feet of grass that I can grow in these things. But that double border was a fascination then, and it still is. This hedge started life because I didn't want to see a wire code mandated fence separating the lawn from the pool. And I hid some of the fence by putting my trademark crazy sticks on some of it, but I didn't want it everywhere. So I thought, why don't I put a hedge, and I'll put it on one side only, a hedge, and they will grow through the fence. So I bought and planted 35 different individual plants, and then I realized I wasn't going to wait forever for these things to go through, so I bought 35 more, so 70 plants in here, and I wanted it to be trimmed as this rollicking kind of serpent, but it's a tapestry hedge, so lots of different evergreens. I made the mistake of having several deciduous shrubs. Big mistake, because in the winter they just became nothing, so big holes in them. So I had to replace those, but otherwise it's a pretty cool signature for this property. You see right here boxes, yews, lots of hollies, different ilexes and so forth, chamaecyparis, which of course want to be 80 feet tall, but anyway, a lot of things, and then trimmed, hard trimmed so that they all meld together. And that's the tapestry aspect.
So what would you say overall, now that you're looking back, you started in 93, here we are in 2021, 2022 when this comes out. What was the biggest challenge overall?
Well, the biggest challenge probably was developing patience. I wanted it to be done. Well, not really done, I just wanted it to move faster. But partly because of the weekend aspect of this place. But partly also I grew to understand that gardens don't happen overnight. And if they do, they're not very interesting gardens. They're gardens that are made by others and for others, and that was never going to be this. So patience, I think, was my biggest challenge over time. But also just, learning. It's interesting, I think, I've thought about this. So many really wonderful gardeners were mentored by other wonderful gardeners. And although I had a grandfather who was a fabulous gardener, and a father and mother who liked gardening a lot and had a big camellia collection down on the Gulf Coast of Texas, I never really had a mentor of much help in terms of just learning about plants, learning the how-to, or what they are, or even the philosophy. So I have hundreds, maybe 1,000 books on gardening, a huge collection of garden books. And I've learned it that way, and then by doing and failing, and then ultimately succeeding and kind of doing it my way, but always having folks around to read and help me.